and Civil Aviation Safety Authority, sorry. Questions? Senator Fawcett. You would like one or two? Yeah, sure. There's about 5 questioners. We've got half an hour. And Senator, no, we've got 6. Senator Gallagher has one as well.
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you. Just a couple of questions following from the white paper. The CASA Regulatory Reform Program that was forecast to be completed by 2011, that was on page 69 of the white paper. Just wondering what the current status is of that regulatory reform program.
John McCormick, Director of Aviation Safety, Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Yes, thank you for that question, Senator. We have in previous estimates discussed the priority issues, and also coming out of the flying training inquiry of last year. The status of the white paper was that the regs would be made by that date, not actually implemented, because obviously some of the regulations affect up to 800 organisations almost, so it takes a considerable amount of time to do the industry training and practice to make sure that those regs enter into the industry without introducing undue risk into the industry at the same time. So we undertook to complete parts 42, 66, 145 and 147 to be made by the end of this year, as I've reported estimates, I think, in the past, and we're on track to complete those regulated parts in time. At the moment, we have the maintenance regulations 145 for the small end of town, so to speak, the GA, Part 135, which is the current low capacity RPT area. They're out to consultation now. The operational regulation parts 119, 121, the high capacity RPT replacement regs, and 135 are interleaved with those maintenance regulations because of the requirements for the continuing airworthiness maintenance organisation, which is part 42. And we have generally taken the view that we don't want to make any of the regs when they're going to have a shelf life of longer than 1 year. We have had some calls from the industry to slow down the rate of the reg implementation program, and we are cognisant of the fact that there is a considerable amount of training to be done to make sure those regs, particularly into the small end of town, are first of all well and truly consulted with the industry, so we take on board their concerns, and then we produce regulations which are harmonised with the existing Part 145 and 42, which we are in the process of rolling out and have been since the 27th of June 2010. All in all, we have a few reg parts that remain to be made. Some of them are around sports aviation, etc. Those we will make next year, and we could complete the regulatory reform program as far as making the regulations by the end of next year. The white paper date could have been achieved, but we would not have been able to put them into the industry or have trained our own staff. So though they could have made the date, they would have gone very close to it. There would have been a long shelf life for those regs before we could implement them, and that was generally not seen as according with government policy.
Sure. I'm pleased to hear about the extensive consultation with industry. Where industry does provide input to you, how much of their input as part of that consultation process is made public?
The comments that come to us are all published, and the comments to the discussion papers and to the notice of proposed rulemaking.
Okay, thank you. Part of the white paper again states that some of the regional offices like Townsville, Cairns and Darwin will be maintained. What's the current status of your plans for services in those regional locations?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Those offices are still open, and we intend to keep them open. They're not manned at particularly high levels. I think Townsville's manned at a level of 5 people at the moment. Cairns, from memory, is manned at 18. We will keep those offices open. There is growing interest, of course, in aviation in North Queensland. It's one of the growth sectors, so we see that our presence there is essential.
So does those manning levels represent a decrease from what they have been in the past?
I'd have to take that on notice to give you, and you have to give me a specific date you want me to go back to, Senator, on that. Townsville has had a bit of attrition due to people, naturally not wanting to move, and the amount of activity outside of Townsville on the civil side not being as high as it is out of Cairns, and we've allowed those people to leave on natural attrition. Depending on the amount of activity that occurs, and in Darwin, which of course also looks back into that region, we have 16 staff from memory. We figure we have enough people at the moment. As the activity increases seasonally, then we look to deploy more people if we have to.
Mm-hmm. Do you, given that you charge fees to industry for services of your inspectors, do you monitor on an ongoing basis the efficiency of the workflow, the work practices of your staff?
Yes, we do, Senator, and in fact we are moving into a review of all our reg services charges and also the time it's taking us to do some of our activities.
Do you have any specific targets for decreasing the level of administrative overhead that delays outcomes from CASA for industry?
We have numerous initiatives on efficiency. We're in the process of completing the rollout of an IT-based, risk-based system, which will allow us to see the risks across the whole operation throughout Australia. That'll allow us to target our surveillance better. We are in the process of replacing quite a few legacy systems that we've had in CASA over many years with a new off-the-shelf, proven CAA-specific system called MPIC. That also will improve our efficiency. We've combined our offices where we can to put people into certificate management teams, which also increases our efficiency. And those things coupled together with the new surveillance procedures manual, the Air Operator Certificate manual and the COA manual, which have all been rewritten over the last 3 years, we expect to see significant efficiency gains. On the same token, we're also looking at our back-end staff versus our front-end staff. It currently runs around 35% back-end staff, perhaps as high as 39%. I've given the organisation a target by the end of next calendar year to get that target down to 30%, which would be well and truly in the forefront of the industry. All of those things should go towards getting us out of paper handling and allowing our efficiency to increase naturally.
Are you having problems attracting and retaining staff in both your technical airworthiness and operations areas?
Yes, Senator, it's always a struggle, particularly to find helicopter pilots. We compete with the industry for pilots with heavy helicopter experience, and as I'm certain you're aware, apart from the military, we don't find many people that have multi-engine helicopter experience, and we certainly can't pay the rates of pay that the industry pays. And technical, a bit the same. We have a turnover around 11% through the organisation, which is very good by Canberra standards, and generally a lot of the people that do leave occasionally come back to us, so we do have an ebb and flow in and out of the industry.
And last question, we spoke previously about Bankstown and the relocation of Bankstown from the actual airport and interfacing on a daily basis with industry. Where is that at the moment?
In regards to our oversight, Senator?
In regard to the relocation of CASA staff from Bankstown Airport to a central location?
The central office in Sydney will be officially opened by the Minister on Friday. We have completed that transfer of the staff to there. At the same time, we've undertaken a review of our travelling costs and where we are recovering those costs for people that are previously surveilled at Bankstown and at Camden. And we have been trained at the moment. I will waive those fees of costs of travel between Sydney and Bankstown, Sydney Camden, Melbourne Moorabbin, Brisbane Archerfield, Adelaide Parafield, and also Perth and Jandakot.
What mechanisms do you have in place to seek feedback from industry in terms of the level of satisfaction they have about amount of time that they can interact with inspectors, response time, and also any costs that may increase? Do you have mechanisms for them to provide feedback specifically associated with the centralised moves?
Well, we do have the CEO feedback line available to me. There is the AOC holder survey. They can send in any email or report any condition they like to the Sydney offices or directly to Canberra. We don't have a forum where we actively go out and ask that question, but we have plenty of interaction with the industry, including the Regional Aviation Safety Forum, etc., where those issues, if there are present, we expect people to raise them.
And last question on that line, feedback from your own staff. Some of the industry comment I've had is that the presence of CASA inspectors on a field has been seen to be a positive thing in terms of essentially awareness of what's actually occurring on the field day-to-day basis, unofficial or impromptu visits to people that are seen to add value. With people not being based at the airfield anymore and losing a certain amount of their day's productivity in travel time, what way do you have to track the lack of that intangible benefit that is provided by somebody being on the airfield, as opposed to being, 25% less productive because they're using time travelling through traffic, as opposed to being at the field?
Well, we do still have people on the airfield regularly. You know, there's still a lot of certificate holders, both AOC and COA holders, Bankstown, for instance. They're still under surveillance. We have our flight testing testing examiners who are also on Bankstown a lot of the time. As far as what the actual time and motion type study effects go, we are conducting, and we're in the middle of doing that as a review over the whole of CASA, not just our inspectors, to see what time's available. Travelling times are generally under an hour from our Sydney office to Bankstown, and they're in the region of 10 to 15 minutes to Mascot. So we're not losing a lot of productivity in reality, I don't think. But as I said, that's a study we have underway, and that will inform our future staffing plans.
Okay,
Thanks, Senator Fawcett. Senator Gallagher.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I asked the question on notice, Mr McCormack, regarding a protocol for dealing with OH&S concerns raised by airline personnel, and thank CASA for the education you've given me in responding and saying, yes, you do have one. So my supplementary question is, can I get a copy of the written protocol and an indication of the number of OH&S concerns raised with CASA by airline personnel?
Yes, certainly, Senator. We'll take that on notice.
Well, that was easy. Senator Eggleston.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I go back to the matter of polar aviation, which I've asked about previously, and the cost incurred by CASA in pursuit of polar aviation during this case, which has gone on for some 8 years. And you've provided an answer on notice, which relates to the costs to ComCover in defending CASA against polar aviation in 2 cases, which amount to $393,667 in legal fees, comprising payments of $207,734 to Ashurst Blake Dawson lawyers, inclusive of barristers' fees, and $178,783 to the Australian Government solicitor, inclusive of barristers' fees. Now, they were legal costs in defending CASA against actions brought by Polar Aviation. But in fact, my questions really referred to earlier costs, and as I said last time, the figure you gave of a total of $65,307 in legal fees incurred in the case against CASA was disputed by the owner of Polar Aviation, Mr Butson, and he says that you correctly admitted there was an additional payment of $30,929 in your unsuccessful appeal in the federal court, which would bring the total up to $96,234. What I seek an assurance from you, because after all this is a public forum and the Senate's entitled to be given the answers to questions it puts, are these the total figures? Are these the final costs, or are there other costs yet to be admitted by CASA in this matter?
No, Senator. No might be a very explanatory answer. When the federal court, the full court of the federal court dismissed Mr Butson's appeal, they ordered Butson and Polar Aviation to pay costs. Your summation of the cost is correct. It's $393,667 in legal fees. ComCover is the Australian, as you know, Government General Insurance Fund, and provides insurance and risk management service to Australian government departments and agencies, not CASA. Not including CASA. CASA itself has not incurred any external legal fees or any measurable internal legal costs. However, as you say on question on notice number 92, we did tell the committee that the previous legal costs were $65,305 internal and $30,929 payment to Grundy, Maitland and Company for costs involved in the 2005 federal court hearing. To my knowledge, there are no other costs of CASA, but I will ask my General Counsel to confirm that. Mr.
Stacey, Executive Manager, Legal Services, Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Senator, I personally handled that litigation in 2005, and I can say that there are no other costs that CASA incurred in relation to both those tribunal and federal court proceedings in 2005.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I accept that answer.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Eggleston. Senator, Mr Murdoch, firstly. Well, Senator Fawcett, did you have another question?
I do, unless Chris Back has.
Is it possible, Chair, if we could just get a response to Senator Xenophon's question? It's just a
Yes,
very short answer.
Absolutely. Mr
Thank you,
Murdoch.
Chair. Thank you, Minister. Senator Xenophon asked Air Services Australia the last day Mr Russell was on the payroll. Just confirming their answer, which is the 24th of May 2012.
Thanks, Mr Murdoch. Senator Fawcett.
I have to check. I think the 16th. But certainly Air Services provided me with that date of 24th of May.
Thank you very much. I'll do it at the end of this. Thank you. Okay, it's all right. We'll finish in a couple of minutes. Senator Fawcett.
Thanks, Chair. Mr McCormack, last estimates we spoke about the role that CASA has in terms of aviation safety, and we're talking about the heads of power that you have to influence safety at an ALOP aerodrome that's not directly controlled by the department. And we talked about things, for example, like a body of water that could attract birds, and you asked for a specific example, and I gave you the one of casino. I'm just wondering what response you can give now in terms of your investigations into that and what actions have occurred.
Are you referring to a question on notice, Senator, or that I do recall the discussion?
Yes, we had the discussion, and just looking at the transcript here, essentially the flow got interrupted, and I don't know that it ever got recorded as a formal question on notice, but there had been an undertaking to look into it, so I'm just wondering, was that looked into, and what way are you able to exercise that head of power where there is a safety issue on a aerodrome that is not a leased federal aerodrome?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Senator, I don't think we captured that as an actual question. Is it acceptable for me to take that on notice
If you
and
could
get
take
back
it
to you
on
next
notice
time?
now, that would be
Thank you.
great. Thank you.
If there are no further questions of CASA. Well, is that Senator Still? I've got a question, or did you sit on something that wasn't yours?
Both.
Okay, all right. Senator Xenophon.
Thank you very much. Mr McCormack, the review that CAS is undertaking into Air Services Australia, can you advise us to the progress of that review, please?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. We did previously inform the committee that we'd have that report done by the 31st of October, and we're on track to do that report and complete that work by the 31st of October.
And that'll be delivered to the Minister?
We haven't actually discussed the disposition of the report, Senator, other than to say we'll complete that work and then work with Air Services to address the findings.
I see.
Such
So there's
they
that
are.
process. So we may not see the light of day for several months, depending on the response from Air Services.
We do have to. It's more or less like any other audit report in a lot of ways. It has to be discussed with the people that are being audited, because in the end, we don't do the report just to produce it and sort of throw it away or disregard it. We do want some actions out of it. So it's a working document when it's complete.
Can I ask, did you speak in the course of your investigation, without identifying any persons, did you speak to ex-employees of Air Services Australia? Because you did make a mention about disgruntled employees. I must say that there was one former employee that was reluctant to come forward as a result of that comment, unfortunately, but did you have a chance to speak to any former employees of Air Services Australia?
I did not personally, Senator, but if you give me a minute, I'll see whether we have an answer to that. No, Senator, we didn't talk to former employees, but we did talk to the Air Traffic Controllers Union.
The fact that you made a comment about disgruntled ex-employees, do you think that may have discouraged some? Well, I know it's discouraged one person that approached me not to come forward. Do you think it would have been preferable to speak to former employees, former senior management, given that there's been such a huge turnover of senior managers in that organisation?
Well, it's a little difficult to distill out of in regards to senior management who come and go from an organisation. What are the circumstances and what are the salient points to us to the investigation? We certainly would have spoken to any former employees, whether they're disgruntled or not. Perhaps my terminology was unfortunate, but it was not intended to discourage anyone from coming forward. Of course, we are more interested in what's happening today, how we've achieved or where we've reached to this position. within Air Service or any organisation for that matter, in some respects informs us, but it doesn't necessarily lead or give us a vector in which to head for the future.
Sure, but Mr McCormick, if somebody worked in an organisation, was at a senior level, left that organisation either under a cloud, pushed, shoved, left voluntarily, and if that person had to sign, for instance, a confidentiality agreement, as may have been the case, does CASA have the authority to override that confidentiality agreement, given that your brief is to safety in the skies?
I don't think I can answer that, Senator, from the point of view that my understanding of most confidentiality agreements, there's a pecuniary penalty if someone breaches that confidentiality agreement, that they have to repay a certain amount of money, or so there is a sanction normally with those confidentiality agreements in the commercial world anyway. And I could not put somebody in a position where...
But this is not the commercial world, is it? We're talking about Air Services Australia.
Well, it is a government business enterprise.
Yes, but its brief is to make sure that aircraft are managed appropriately in the skies, though.
Well, my understanding of their brief or their act is that they are to provide an air traffic control service.
Senator, I think you're getting dangerously close to a legal opinion being sought from this officer, which I think would be outside of this.
Well, no, I'm not seeking a legal opinion of Mr McCormick, Minister, through you, Chair. I'm asking the question, does CASA consider that it has the authority to speak to former employees of Air Service Australia, firstly?
In breach of a confidentiality agreement, which is the question.
If the question stops there, Senator, do we have the authority to speak to Air Services employees? Yes, we do.
Right, but you're saying that your ability to speak to those employees might be fettered by a confidentiality agreement.
Well, someone who's left with a confidentiality agreement is no longer an employee of Air Services.
But if they have, I'm just concerned that in this very welcome audit by CASA into Air Services Australia, that there have been at least 14 general managers, members of the Executive Committee, who have departed Air Services Australia between July 2005 and the 30th of June 2011. I think there have been more since then. Whether it would have been prudent, thorough, comprehensive to actually speak to those senior executives of Air Services Australia as part of this audit process.
Well, leaving aside the question that the Minister has addressed on the fact that I can't give a legal opinion,
No,
I
not
don't
asking
think my
you to.
General Counsel either can on our powers versus a confidentiality agreement. But the circumstances by which people leave an organisation are not normally known to us.
Sorry, let me rephrase the question so we don't labour the point. You're undertaking a comprehensive audit of Air Services Australia. That's
Correct.
a clear fact. There have been issues about the complaints about the functioning of the organisation, and you say that had nothing to do with the audit. But it was an audit that CASA decided to do for whatever reason. If there are issues in terms of the functioning of Air Services Australia, wouldn't it have been a reasonable course to go down to also speak to some of those senior managers that could have been responsible for key aspects of training and the administration of that organisation?
When people leave from positions which are significant positions, particularly on the operational side, we note then who has replaced them. But we have no authority to compel anybody in Air Services to talk to us.
No, but in terms of former employees, the point is this. Sometimes a former employee, they may have left in perfectly good circumstances and on perfectly good terms, but if a former employee has left, if they're no longer employed there, by definition, they may feel freer to speak about that organisation that they've left, rather than somebody who's in the thick of it, who's drawing a paycheck from that organisation.
Yeah, I think what we see is that if someone is left from a position of substantial management control, and if we're auditing and we're looking at the system that they have left behind, or the parts of the system that they are responsible for, we see traces of what's happened. We see what the situation is like. And quite often there might be many reasons why, and let's say this part is operating at a suboptimal level, like we're not happy where it's operating. Sure. One of the reasons could be that there were incorrect managers. That could be one of the reasons. Now, there are many other reasons why it could be operating at a suboptimal level. What I'm getting at is that forensically, you generally see the hand of the people that have been in charge when you look into those areas.
But wouldn't it have been preferable, Mr McCormack? I mean, couldn't then CASA make its assessment based on its expertise, based on looking at issues of aviation safety, you could then make your own assessment as to whether the former manager that you spoke to was suboptimal, whether they were competent or not. Haven't you lost an opportunity to perhaps get some useful information from some of those 14 senior managers or more that have left that organisation?
I see where you're heading with this, Senator, in that I mean, I know what the element is you're looking at, but we look at an audit or we do a review, whatever we want to call it. Let's, for a working term, say this 172 is an audit. An audit is a snapshot through the organisation at a time. We have no ability to know what the employment history has been of people. We have no ability to know what internal machinations have happened within the management group or the senior management group or the work groups. We don't see that. We can't go back and reconstruct the organisation in a previous iteration, say, okay, what did it look like 6 months ago when this person got fired? Therefore, was that person fired legitimately? I can't make those connections, and I'm not really in the business of making those connections. I'm interested in the outcome of what the organisation produces. Sure. I'm interested in whether it's robust enough to do that, whether it's resilient enough to do that.
But doesn't that go to the issue that the resilience, the robustness of the organisation, you may get some useful information from those who have previously been in that organisation saying these are some of the systemic issues that we faced that may still be there, that a former employee may be more willing to talk about than a current employee.
We would
you concede that. Do you concede that point at least?
We would certainly, I think, everyone who has left an organisation will have a point of view and an opinion of what's happened and how they've come to leave the organisation and what the organisation is like that they've left behind. We certainly would take that on board if people come forward and say, I want to tell you about my time in air services, for instance. The difficulty is I have no ability to go out and find these people. I have no ability to compel them to talk to me. I can't compel anybody to talk to me. So it's an issue of that they have to come forward to us.
But you're saying that there's no way you could contact them?
I don't have the resources to go chasing people that have left another organisation. That's a management function. The control of the people is a management function of the organisation that has the people. I'm there to regulate aviation safety. I'm interested in the output. I'm not interested in, particularly in a lot of ways, of how they do it, if you know what I mean, when it comes to the personnel side of the house.
Right. So just to crystallise this, do you think, in hindsight, that there could have been some benefit in speaking to former senior managers of the organisation, that some of them may have given you some information that would have been of some use to this audit?
I don't know whether it would have been used to the audit, but it would have formed background information if these people had to come forward and spoken to us. And it's not too late. If they wish to come forward and speak to us, they can.
But you won't seek them out?
I don't have a mandate to seek them out, Senator, and I don't have the resources to do it.
So if someone does come forward in the next, that you can guarantee their confidentiality?
If they come forward to us, Senator, yes.
So there won't be any repercussions if they speak to you freely?
Well, if they speak to us freely and they're an ex-employee of Air Services, I can't see how Air Services can take any action against them, or are you talking about a third party?
Unless there's a confidentiality agreement.
Unless there's a confidentiality agreement. It's for each individual person. If anybody comes forward and wishes to speak to us, and I'd encourage anybody who wishes to speak to us, it will be information which we take on board. It is not going to be given the same status, if you will, as facts, like how many controllers do you have, how many hours do they work, those sort of hard numbers, which really inform the kernel or the working engine of an audit report. But anybody's opinion is just that, and we will listen to anybody's opinion.
So if any former employees did come forward, that might, in the next week or so, I'm not saying they will, but if any did come forward, that might affect the reporting date of this of your audit.
Well, depending what smoking gun they come equipped with, Senator.
I'm not suggesting use that smoking anything.
Analogy. If they come forward with an opinion, we'll use it with opinion, and we will see whether that correlates with what we already know, whether it doesn't. How we deal with it depends on what the information is. The report will be out on the 31st of October.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.